into history!
What's up, good people? Welcome to the Lightning Round Podcast. You got the OG lineup here, Jamie and Garrett. Unfortunately, Craig could not be here because of some personal circumstances beyond his control, but I am here, Jamie is here, and we are here to cover the free agent additions from the Chargers, the re-signings, the outside free agents they signed. We'll talk about all that through week one. Been a really slow weekend for the Chargers and the NFL really in general. So not much, but up until from Monday to Friday, we got lots and lots of names. I don't know that it was the big splash that everybody had hoped it would be, but there are a lot of names.
Definitely not.
No, and they needed a lot. They needed to fill a lot of roster spots, and they've done some of that. They've done some of that with some of the additions. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go over the re-signings first, all those internal free agents that the Chargers re-signed, and they're going to run it back with for at least another year for 2025. And then we'll talk about the outside additions they signed through free agency. So, Jamie, let's just go ahead and jump right in. We got our graphics here, of course. This is all the internal free agents they re-signed, including Tucker Fisk, who was tendered. We're going to go just down the list, and let's talk about maybe the biggest re-signing here. Not probably, definitely the biggest re-signing. Khalil Mack, who signed for one more year, $18 million.
Yeah, so, they obviously couldn't go into the season without both Mack and Bosa. With the decision to cut Bosa, it seems like they basically just gave Bosa's money to Mack for the most part. So they bring back Mack, who's still playing at a high level. He's obviously that power rusher, the great run defender, not getting to the quarterback as often as we might expect, but still highly productive in terms of pressuring the quarterback, still producing some sacks. So, good signing. They keep a leader on the team. They keep a productive player on the team. They didn't have to go more than 1 year, which is a good thing. It's a fully guaranteed deal. Obviously, we know he's going to be here, so that doesn't matter either way. But smart signing, keep him in the building. He wanted to be here. Obviously, he believes in the plan, in the vision, the culture, or he wouldn't have come back, especially after the disappointing playoff loss. So good to have him in tow and kind of, build that edge group around Khalil.
Yeah. In my mind, the biggest priority in terms of internal free agents for the Chargers to get him re-signed. He's just 2 seasons away from that 17 sack season he had. Still proven to be effective even at 34. So, having that 1 year deal, like you said, is smart because, being 34, there's going to be a point where he just falls off a cliff. So no point in kind of kicking that can down the road. So just having 1 year is great. It solidifies the edge group. Even with the loss with Joey Bosa, they do have Thule and Dupree still, which are nice rotational pieces. Seem like it at least so far. But it does feel like they're going to need to make some kind of edge move, whether it's in free agency or in the draft. There are some veteran edges like Zadarius Smith and Von Miller still out there, but Azeez Ojulari is another name that people have thrown around. So there are some edges on the market, but with the loss of Joey Bosa, having Khalil Mack is great. Having Thule and Dupree there is good, but it really feels like they're going to need one more piece there on the edge group.
Yeah, I think what worries me a little bit about the edge group is as productive as Thule was last year, and he definitely took a step forward last year, he's still a guy who relies a lot, in my opinion, on being schemed to the quarterback. He had a lot of success when he was on the field with Mack and Bosa at the same time, and they could run stunts and twists and create passes to the quarterback for him. So I'm hoping, as much as he did take a step forward last year, and I'm not knocking him at all, I think this is just the reality of the situation. I'm hoping they're not looking at those 8.5 sacks last year as, oh, he's arrived. He's our clear-cut number 2. Yeah. We don't need somebody ahead of him as we continue to bring him along. Because he's still a guy, he's not somebody who wins really with explosiveness off the line. He's not going to beat you with his first 1 or 2 steps. He's still not somebody who wins with technique. He wins with scheme, and he wins with effort a lot of times. And those other games, he's never going to be a guy who wins with explosive athleticism. Mm-hmm. So the technique side of it, the counters, the rush plan, that rusher's toolbox, so to speak, is something that still has to develop. So I hope they're not looking at him and thinking he's arrived. and that they're still looking for something on the edge to help deepen that group. And I also hope they're either hopefully in the draft, they're looking for somebody who can provide pressure from the interior. There's still some options in free agency, one that I think we'll talk about a little bit later.
Okay.
I think they need, in my opinion, they kind of need to reinvent how they go about getting pressure, because the really good quarterbacks aren't bothered by edge pressure. They're bothered by having guys thrown in their lap. And I think that interior pressure is something that really needs to step up, which is why I'm so surprised they didn't re-sign Ford, and why they didn't bring in somebody in free agency, at least not yet, who can get to the quarterback from a 3 technique or a 5 technique type of spot.
Yeah, and when you look forward, you now know Max here for 2025. 26 is in question. Thule has not quite proven to be that, go-to starting edge on the opposite side. Dupree's obviously a rotational guy, and only here through the next season as well. So it really feels like they're going to have to get younger and fresher. So it does feel like an edge in the draft is probably on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think suddenness on the edge is going to be important, because they don't have that in Thule, and Mac is really more of an edge power rusher.
Right.
So having somebody who can win with 1.5 steps off the line when the ball is snapped, and really put that kind of pressure with their speed and length and athleticism off the edge, I think is going to be really important.
Yeah. And we see all your questions coming in, and we'll definitely get to all these as we start to wrap up this whole list we're going here. So next up here, you kind of mentioned it. It felt like there were 2 interior defensive linemen that were just excellent additions last year. It was Poona Ford, and then it was this man right here, T.R. Tart. Ford goes to the Rams. Tart stays. They signed him for 1 more year, $5.5 million. Tart really felt like he came on strong towards the end of last season. Really, really helped in the run game, especially being next to Poona. Those 2 together worked really, really well. But another 1-year deal for a guy that's a key interior run stopper, not a guy to get after the quarterback. That was Poona, like Jamie mentioned, but he is no longer. And so they beef up the interior of the defensive line. It helps stop the run. But they still got a pretty big issue getting after the quarterback in the interior.
Yeah, so I like bringing Tart back. I think I would have liked it more if he was brought back with Poona. I'm a little bit surprised at the number. I think he made like $1.25 or $1.5 million last year, somewhere in that ballpark, just off the top of my head. So to go from that to $5.5 million without really producing much in terms of sacks surprised me a little bit. But right now, if you look at their interior line group, he is really the only, quote unquote, he's not really a pass rusher, but he's really the only quote unquote interior rusher they have. Everybody else is there to clog up the middle and stop the run. Yep. I think they're counting on him to try to get to the quarterback more with more snaps, maybe in a little bit different role. But he was really productive down the stretch. He and Ford were a great tandem on the interior. Still, in my opinion, more of a rotational piece than of like an every down, like he's the anchor of the defensive line. I don't really think he's that guy, at least not yet. But maybe, at $5.5 million, maybe he outpaces that contract. Maybe he gets you 5 or 6 sacks with more snaps, and he outpaces that contract, and it looks like a steal. Not necessarily complaining about the number. I was just surprised by it. Glad it's a 1-year deal. Glad they didn't have to go to multiple deals to get him. Kind of feels like maybe they went to Ford and Tart with very similar deals, and they just signed the one that took the deal. So good signing. It's going to help the group. But that group still needs, like a lot of these groups that we're going to talk about, that group still needs more work.
Yes. It feels like still a work in progress for most of this depth chart through their free agent signing. So T.R. Tart is back. He will be back for another year. Really impressed towards the end of the year. I can't stress enough how important he was down the later end of that season and going into the playoffs. So then the next one on this list was actually, I think, the first internal free agent signing they signed in free agency, at least the one that I can remember off the top of my head. It was Elijah Molden. He gets a 3-year, $18.5 million deal.
I love this contract. I know there were some people when it was announced who were worried about the $18.5 million. Oh my God, he's making over $6 million a year. just because that's the average annual value. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what he's making per year. I think his cap hit this year is like it's basically three and 2/3 million dollars, $3.66 million, which is a steal for a guy who played both safety positions. I think he played some slot. I think I even read that he played some corner at times. He was all over the field, very productive in terms of getting to the football and breaking up passes and just being a playmaker on the football with the ball in the air. In my opinion, their defense was never as good last year as it was with Molden on the back end. It just wasn't the same when Alohi Gilman came back at all. Just in terms of the awareness and the range and the playmaking ability, it just wasn't there. So very happy he's back. To get him back for less than $6 million in the safety market, which I think it would have been really easy to have to pay him $6 million this year if he hit the market, to me is a steal. And they're getting him back for less than $4 million. So great job of negotiating this deal by Ed McGuire and Joe Ortiz. Great to have him back. He's going to be a huge part of the secondary. Again, the safety room still needs some work. They have 3 safeties on the roster right now who are signed. They're going to need to bring somebody in, whether it's later in the draft or later in free agency. Maybe we still get a Tony Jefferson signing at some point. He played pretty well at the end of the season, but Molden to me is just, I wouldn't go so far as to call him a ball hawk, but he's very productive in terms of getting to the football with the ball in the air. He's a good tackler. He's good in the run game. He just does everything well without doing everything at like a super high level. He's just productive. And you need as many of those guys as you can get. So I love the signing. I think it's really smart. And they got him at a good number. And I just think it's a really smart move.
Yeah, 7 pass breakups and 3 interceptions last year. He put up career numbers. And on top of that, they put in that ripcord after year 2 in Molden's contract. So they do have an out if it does not work out after 2 seasons. So they do have that safety net. But, it just felt like he had kind of a career resurgence, and Minter's defense last year was on the brink of getting cut by the Titans. Chargers throw a pick at him, get him, and then he puts up career numbers. It did seem like Molden, when playing free safety, was kind of picked on a little bit towards the end of that year because of the lack of the deep speed, but he was always around the football, man. He was making a bunch of plays, recovered a bunch of fumbles too. He just happened to just be around the football all the time. So having a guy like Elijah Molden back who can do multiple things, playing DB, both safety spots, corner and slot, like you mentioned, having that versatile DB piece on the roster is really important, not only for Minter's defense, but just for the Chargers as a whole. So really important to get Molden back. I am glad. And anything to put him on the field more than Alohi Gilman, addition by subtraction.
A-okay with me. Make it happen.
All right. So let's go on to our next one, and it is Denzel Perryman on this list. And this, I do like this signing, but this feels like a Puna Tart situation. You have Perryman on the field because he was a really nice compliment to Deion Henley's game last year. He was vital and key to Henley's breakout season last season. And you thought, hey, you bring back Perryman because he works so well with Henley. You bring back Tart, you would think, oh, we should probably bring back Puna too, because Tart and Puna fed off each other last year. But alas, Puna is at the other team in LA. But getting Perryman back in the mix, adds some linebacker depth, a bump in the run game for the Chargers, of course. Minter's defense was much different when Perryman was not on the field last year. And it's a short-term solution for a linebacker in a hole on this roster that needed to be filled. So to get Perryman back is good. It helps in the run game. And Henley and Perryman paired up well last year.
Yeah, Henley and Perryman paired up well. And I read a couple of things today that made me think that they brought him in really for his leadership and because they think he can help have the same effect on Junior Colson this year that he had on Henley last year.
Oh, good.
Little surprised at the number, but the leadership, the productivity, hopefully he can stay on the field a little bit more this year. They were really hurting without him in the run game when he wasn't out there. But solid veteran, understands the system, was really good for Henley. Hopefully he can help bring Colson along, and maybe they can split snaps as the season goes on, just so they can keep Perryman fresh and healthy. They stayed pat at the linebacker position. I doubt they're going to draft one unless they go really late. but they're at 4 linebackers now, 4 or 5.
5. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, Colson, Henley, Perriman, Dye, and Phillips.
Yep.
Right. So they're at 5. Special teams is covered with Dye and Phillips, and you've got Perriman, Colson, and Henley hopefully covering most of the snaps on the defense. So solid move.
Yeah. Okay. Next up here is the backup quarterback, Taylor Heineke. 1 year, $6.2 million.
So this is a deal that sounds like it's got some incentives. I think the verbiage on this was that it's up to $6.2 million. So he's probably going to be making somewhere closer to $3 or $4 million in terms of a cap number, with some pretty heavy incentives that he probably won't make because he's probably not going to play unless they're like per game active incentives. So, I mean, it's fine. We've been begging for them to upgrade backup quarterback for a long time. They got somebody in the building last year who they liked. I think he's a guy who can make plays and keep you in the games, if not win a game or two if Herbert gets hurt, provided the rest of the offense and the offensive line are healthy and he's not out there by himself. But, I mean, Heineke's a solid backup. We're finally, it seems, done with the Easton Stick days. So that's good news. Yeah. What's that?
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. I think we're finally there, but we'll find out.
He's still floating out there, but okay.
I think he's still going to be floating out there for a while. But if they got a backup quarterback for $3 or $4 million with incentives, more power to them. That's another good job of negotiating. I actually thought they might bring in Tyler Huntley, just because of the familiar Tyler Huntley.
Oh, okay.
Just because of the familiarity with the Ravens. I thought they could get him for around $3 or $4 million. So to get Heineke, who's a little bit more experienced as a backup, for that same money, I think is solid.
And there were rumors they were sniffing around Jameis Winston too. So they were looking for something. But yeah, Heineke hopefully means no more Easton Stick. And we're at a point now where we were going, hey, if Herbert gets hurt, throw in whoever you can to just tank the season so we get a draft pick. But now we're at a point where it's like, hey, if Herbert gets hurt, maybe a guy like Heineke can steal a game or two and squeak into the playoffs, and hopefully, Herbert comes back by then. So it's a nice place to be. And selfishly, it makes the preseason a lot more fun because you have a capable quarterback and you can actually get a look at these pass catchers
and actually evaluate.
Yes. During camp and in preseason. So unlike the years we had with Easton Stick, we can actually get a good look at these pass catchers in preseason and in camp. So I'm totally good with Heineke. I was really pumped to have him last year, and they got him just moving away from Stick, which just felt like it dragged on for 100 years. You can't tell me how long that is. It felt like 50 to 60 years.
Forever.
It was too long.
It was 5 years, 6 years, but it just took forever. So long. So
all right. Well, the time has come to talk about the next one on this list, and it is center Bradley Bozeman, who signs for 2 years, $6.5 million. And if Bradley Bozeman is depth signing to push Zion or whatever rookie they draft, then I am totally okay with this. But if Bozeman has ran out week 1 without a contingency plan, we riot. The chat and me and Jamie, because they cannot run it back with Bozeman and think they're going to have any type of success, especially with how they want to run the ball, and especially with Zion next to them. Those two have not played well together. Like we talked about complementing each other, Zion and Bozeman do not. They clash. And so I know that like me, a lot of people were pretty annoyed by this signing, but it just feels like 2 years put everybody in a spiral on Twitter and everywhere else, and us really. But they do have a parachute in 2025. They did put a ripcord. So if it does not work out this season, they could cut him next offseason. And I think that's a saving grace. So it really feels like it is a 1 year deal. But they have going into free agency, we had talked about they got to upgrade 3 spots on the interior. And so far, they did one of those 3. And that's a good start, but they need to make 1 or 2 more moves. And so give me Will Hernandez. Let Zion and Bozeman battle it out for center, and we're all sitting pretty.
Yeah, so the Bozeman signing, like you, it annoyed the shit out of me when it first happened. But then I had some time to think about it, and I looked at the numbers, and at first I was like, oh my God, they're going to roll this interior offensive line back, and I'm going to shoot myself.
Multi-year contract. Yeah.
I,
It felt like Old Yeller. A multi-year
Yeah.
contract.
yeah.
Let's
Oh
take
my
Jamie
God,
out.
what the fuck?
We got to take Jamie out back.
Yeah. Take me out back and put me in my misery. You're never going to hear the end of it. But I had some time to think about it, and especially when they signed Becton. And then you start hearing whispers coming out of the Chargers camp that they think Zion can play center. Matt Money Smith said something to the effect of they don't think Zion has enough on his plate at left guard, and they think that if they move him to center, he'll have more on his plate, it'll keep him more engaged, and he'll play better. Not sure I agree.
What?
However, it sounds like Zion's in a situation where he's going to be probably competing at left guard and center with Salyer and Bozeman, and hopefully at least one interior offensive lineman that they draft. So I think this is a 1-year backup situation. When we did when Craig and I did our internal free agents back in February, I initially was not keeping Bozeman. And I think I had kept like 5 of the free agents that they had leaving because I didn't want to bring any of them back.
Right.
And then I went back and thought about it. I was like, all right, well, he's played both guard positions. He's played center. He's not good at any of them, but he's depth and he knows the system and he's familiar with Roman. I had them re-signing him for 1 year, $2.5 million, and they got him for 1 year, I think $2.3 million, or well, his cap number this year is $2.3 million, I think. So it's either 2.3 or 2.13. The numbers are getting mixed up in my head right now. But you want to pay him a little over $2 million to be the backup center and a swing guard. I'm cool with that for a year. I don't think there's any way in hell he's making the second year on this deal unless he wins a job and just balls out this year. There's no way he's going to see 2026 as a Charger. So this is just he's keeping somebody else's place warm for a year.
Yep.
And providing depth at all 3 interior line positions. So I'm fine with it. I don't love him. I kind of wish he wasn't back, but I get it. It's fine. They're filling holes. They can't just let everybody walk. As much as we want them to let most of these guys walk, they can't. So it's fine. They have to fill roster spots. They did it with a guy who knows the system, knows the offensive coordinator, and he can theoretically play all 3 interior line positions. So it is what it is. It's fine.
Yeah. If it's a depth signing, we're all happy with it. And if he does see the second year of his contract, that means he played extremely well, and that benefits everybody involved. So I'm okay with it because they did put that parachute in the second year. When you see Bradley Bozeman re-signed for multiple years, I mean, there was sheer panic in my heart.
Yeah.
I could not believe what I was reading.
Was it panic or was it something else?
A heart attack? Yeah, it was something. I don't know. Something more extreme. What you mean, like hate in my heart? Is that what you mean? Yes, a lot of it. All right, so now we're moving on. You talked about him a little bit, but so they re-signed Troy Dye. He got a 2-year, $5.5 million deal.
Yeah, and this is actually, I think this is another really smart, really good piece of negotiating. He made, I think, $3.5 million last year, something like that. And they got him back for less for the next 2 years. I thought they might have to re-sign him for 1 year, $5 million, or 2 years, somewhere in the $8 million range. So to get him back for 2 years, 5.5 is a good deal. He's going to make $2.25 million each of the next 2 years. Super valuable on special teams. Showed that he can be good against the run.
Yeah.
On defense, not that great in coverage. He had some flashes as a pass rusher, as a blitzer at least. So some avenues to use him in certain packages on defense. Gives you experienced veteran depth. And obviously that special teams value is huge. So I like this signing. I think their linebacker room is pretty much set unless they want to draft somebody in the very late rounds with one of their last 2 or 3 picks to try to, push Dye or Phillips or something like that. But this is a guy who I think he's going to be here for the term of the contract. He's probably going to outpay what they're playing him. And he provides a lot of value on special teams and on defense when he's out there at least on first and second down. So I like this deal.
I do too. Yeah. I mean, he was a nice linebacker depth piece in spots. And like you said, man, watching him back, I loved him in the run game. And it's more than just that Nick Neiman type, who they obviously lost in free agency, where he is strictly special teams. This is a guy you can bring on in obvious passing downs. If you want to bring on a package to use him as a blitzer, you can put him on the field. He's not a guy that you have to use at, the very last minute when everybody goes down and you have to put him in. He's a guy you could bring in for, a handful of snaps on defense if you wanted to, but gives the Chargers real good depth and is really helps on special teams. And in this multi-year deal, he's got that parachute in 2025. So just like Bradley Bozeman, if for whatever reason Troy Dye does not work out, they can cut him next offseason. But I don't see that happening because he's, what he is. He's a, filling out the depth chart type of linebacker, help you out on special teams. So a low cost depth signing, really a way to get out of it if it doesn't work out this season. But I'm sure that they will keep him for the 2 years that he signed to, because he's just, he knows his role. He is a, fill out the roster guy and a key piece to special teams.
Yeah. And the way they structured the deal, they didn't backload it. Like, they could get out of it going into next year if they want to, but it's one of the few deals that you see where like the money is evenly spread through both years of deal. And I think that kind of tells you they expect him to be here and be one of those top probably 4 linebackers for the next 2 years, which is great. They believe in him. He earned it. It's a really smart, solid deal.
Yeah. I liked it. Even for a guy that wasn't a marquee signing, obviously, in these re-signing deals, it was a smart move, and I like that little addition. So next up, one that I did not really care for, and I couldn't. I rolled my eyes to the back of my head when I saw this roll across my Twitter feed. Jalen Reagor re-signs 1 year, $1.3 million deal. I didn't think Reagor should have been brought back, but at the very least, it's wide receiver depth. And when you look at it, I mean, he was the backup returner last year. He did have to come in a pinch when Darius Davis went down. So hopefully they find another player to take his place in the draft. But at the very least, it helps create some kind of competition at camp. He is only signed for $1.3 million. So a cut could happen. It's not like he's part of the 53 and cemented in that role, but a name that nobody's really that excited about, but hopefully will create some camp competition.
So my initial response when I saw this was, what the fuck? I didn't like it at all. And then I thought about it and I was like, all right, well, it's depth. Let's see if he makes the roster. Let's see what the numbers look like. They need to fill out space. Like I said, they had to fill roster spots, and he's a body. And then the numbers came out and I looked at it really closely. I do not think they expect him to be on the team this year. Very, very minimal signing bonus. There's a $52,000 or $55,000 bonus if he's on the roster for week 1, and there are a bunch of workout bonuses. There's almost no guarantees on this. So to me, this is a guy who's here to keep his seat warm. They're probably going to bring in, my guess, 2 wide receivers, hopefully one in the first 3 or 4 rounds, and then one in the middle of the late rounds. And he will not be here. So they had to fill out a spot at wide receiver. They obviously didn't like the free agent crop very much. And so they just brought in a body who's familiar with the system and could hold a seat down until they see what happens with the draft.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody was excited to see that. And then, you could obviously get out of that contract if it doesn't work out. So it's not that big of a deal. You don't love him seeing Jalen Reagor on your team, but he's there, and we'll see if he makes it through that 53 cut. Next up, we don't really talk about kickers all that much, but J.K. Scott is back, a 2 year, $6 million deal. Excuse me.
Yeah. They don't love it. He's been super inconsistent. Even the hang time thing that he's known for hasn't been super consistent for him.
Yeah.
It seems like he's not super reliable in clutch situations. But they needed a punter. They're only going to pay him $2.1 million this year. Didn't love it, but it's not the end of the world. It's another roster spot filled, something they don't have to worry about in the draft or free agency. It is what it is.
Yeah, I just hope that they get a punter in as a UDFA, and they just at least push him, because I don't think he's deserved a starting punter spot. He's got to earn that this offseason. So I hope they get a punter after the draft.
Yeah, there are lots of ways to find punters. I think a lot of punters are usually picked up as a UDFA at some point anyway. So
Yeah.
Bring in a couple guys to push him and compete with him and see if he can hold on to his spot. And they can get out of it next year and save a bunch of money. So probably only here for 1 year anyway.
Yeah, they do have that out. They another 2-year deal that has that out after that first year. So making their guys earn it. That's for sure with these multi-year deals. Okay. Last one. I mean, this felt like a no-brainer with Tucker Fisk. He was awesome as an extra blocking tight end on rundowns for a lot of the season. Pitched in a few times as a pass catcher, but I mean, he really impressed as a run blocker. So obviously enough to bring him back. And we talk about it every year. Tendering one of these guys is practically playing with house money.
Yeah, I mean, he was a exclusive rights free agent, so they had the opportunity to sign him without him negotiating with anybody else. They took that opportunity. It's a veteran league minimum, so he's making $960,000. This is one of those moves. It's like, unless the guy is awful, these moves are made almost every time. It's basically procedural. You've got like a free year with a guy, so why not keep it? And he happened to be very productive as a blocker. I think he's going to be a very integral part as a run blocker on this offense this year. So yeah, easy move to make, smart move to make, good with it. It's one of those ones that I felt really strongly about. Little surprised that they didn't bring back Stone Smart. And I even thought they might bring back Foster Sarrell, but it seems like maybe Pipkins is headed towards being the swing tackle at this point. So good move with Fisk. Yeah,
Stone Smart surprised me the most because he felt like he was they were developing him into a real pass catcher, and then didn't even do it.
Yeah,
that was surprising.
Yeah, not like the end of the world, not something I'm upset about. It could have been either way.
Yeah, of course.
I would not have given him a restricted free agent tender, but I might have considered offering him like a 1-year deal to see if he'd come back for like half of the free agent tender, something like that. So a little surprised, not the end of the world, not something that's like earth shattering, but a little surprised.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So these are all the guys everybody knows. They watched them all last season, I'm sure. But now it's time to bring up the new guys. A familiar face, one of them at least. Here are all the outside free agents the Chargers signed this year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different players at this point. So let's just start off with the most marquee signing, at least was at the beginning. It is the former Steelers running back, Najee Harris, who signed a 1-year, $5.25 million deal.
Yeah, this is one I was a little worried about because I thought they might throw multiple years at him.
When I texted you about they're thinking about Najee, you were
I said I want no part of him. Yeah, I want no part. Yeah. I did not want them to bring him in. I know he's been productive in Pittsburgh and the schemes are similar, but he's like a 3 yards in a cloud of dust runner. I don't think the vision is great. I don't think there's much explosiveness there. I don't know. It's fine to grind out yards, I guess. But they're just going to have to they're going to have to draft a running back, in my opinion, to balance him out. Somebody who can slash and break a big play, because that's just not who he is. But for the way they want to run the football, he's kind of like the younger, healthier, maybe slightly more explosive version of Gus, that straight downhill, head down, grind out the yards kind of guy. He's not going to bounce the ball outside a whole lot. He's not going to dance around. He's going to hit the hole and grind out tough yards. And that's on a 1-year deal. I'm cool with it. Like, I don't love him as a player, but if they think he fits, I'm going to trust the coaching staff. I'm fine with it. And if he winds up hitting those $4 million in incentives, then all the better. I doubt he will. I don't know what the incentives are, but I doubt he's going to hit all of them. But they got him on a 1-year deal. It's hard to complain on a 1-year deal on a guy who's rushed for 1,000 yards. What, four years in a row?
Yep.
So, yeah, I think hopefully he upgraded the running game at least a little bit, and they can find somebody to complement him.
Yeah, because there does feel like a couple caveats with this signing. Having 1,000 yards for 4 straight seasons is nice. Getting the power running rusher that they clearly wanted all along is great. We talked about all year how it felt like the team was starting to build their roster in the image of having a running game that will wear teams down late. And while J.K. Dobbins had a ton of success last year, it feels like Harris fits that type of mold that they're going for. Harris does feel like he's slowly declining, which makes this 1-year deal much easier much easier pill to swallow. They did want to improve the run game, and this felt like their best fit. Jamie and I, for as long as we've had a microphone in front of our face, have never advocated for signing a running back in free agency. But this aligns with what the staff wants in terms of identity. Continuing to improve the Chargers' interior offensive line is going to really help propel this signing if they can do that. And then adding a quicker running back to add to the ground attack that Najee Harris is, that fire to the whatever wind or earth. What would Harris be? Earth? Yeah. What would Harris be? Earth.
He's a rock,
right? He's a rock on Earth. Yeah. So Najee Harris may need a little bit of fire and maybe some wind too, but they're gonna have to add somebody else. But let me pose a question to you, Jamie. I was going over the list of potential free agents.
I know where you're going with this.
Oh, okay. Ahead. All right.
That
I would consider bringing back, and I do not hate the idea of pairing Najee Harris and J.K. Dobbins. What are your thoughts about signing him?
You read my mind and you buried the lead because I figured we'd talk about that with our favorite free agents. However,
sorry.
No, it's cool. I agree. He's on my list as well. I mentioned wanting to find somebody who can slash, maybe make some people miss, and give you those explosive runs. And I feel like if Najee is going to be the primary guy and he's going to get 15 touches a game and grind out tough yards, then you can give 15 touches a game to JK, have him slash. And if Harris is doing his job, wearing guys down, you're going to get bigger runs from Dobbins probably later in the game. So we're right on the same page. Okay. I think that's a really smart move, and that it would eliminate one more position they have to draft this year in the draft. What they may do anyway, just because they want to run the ball as much as they do. But no, I think we're right on the same page. I love the thought process. I completely agree. He's on my list. It just makes too much sense. They complement each other so well. Totally agree.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we'll get to some of our favorite remaining free agents towards the end of this podcast, just to let you guys know. And I'm sorry I jumped the gun there with that. All right. So it was just train of thought. So next up, my favorite signing of this offseason. They bring in the Eagles former guard, Mekhi Becton, 2 years, $20 million, having a Becton at 6'7", 360 at right guard next to Joe Alt at 6'8". Man, you know that Harbaugh is salivating when he saw that man on the board still left in free agency. I mean, they are starting to build a big boy O-line, and I know nothing makes Harbaugh sleep better than having a guy like Becton and Alt next to each other. And they, quite honestly, might be in competition for the most athletic right side of any offensive line in the NFL. Both incredible athletes and big-time testers during the combine. Becton showed that athleticism in the open field. He's an excellent run blocker, really found his home inside as a pass blocker, had really bad issues in New York on an island, but went inside. It felt like it masked a lot of those issues. He had a bunch of bad things go wrong in New York, but it felt like he really put it together at this last season with the Eagles. There was an issue with knee injuries and there was a big red flag a couple years ago, but he seemed to all but turn that around the last couple seasons. And it just feels like they're kind of like Monstars pairing of Joe Alt, Mekhi Becton on the right side. Just keep adding to that line. Please, please, please keep adding. And this group could really take over games if you've got Najee Harris in the backfield, and then you start building up that offensive line like they're doing now.
Yeah, it's hard not to like. First of all, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were a Becton truther when he was in the draft, weren't you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah, I thought so.
I sure was. Mm-hmm.
I thought I remember that. So I knew you'd like this deal.
I love it.
So this is such a good deal for the Chargers in terms of player and what they're spending for him. If you look at the deals some of these guards got in free agency this year, to get him on an average annual value of $10 million is freaking amazing. Coming up, being part of that offensive line in Philadelphia, coming off the Super Bowl, he's a mauler. He's huge. He moves so well. He can get to the second level. He does all those things that they just struggled to do at right guard with Pipkins and Salyer last year. It's just such a smart move. And it just feels like they stole him and he's going to fit right in and be a perfect fit. And, 2 years, $20 million is great. He's probably going to make somewhere between $6 and $8 million this year is my guess, which looks even better on paper. And with some of the fitness, work ethic, toughness concerns that some coaches have expressed about him, if you get him at $6 or $7 million this year and he doesn't work out, you can cut him next year and save a bunch of money. It just works out. They set themselves up with a ripcord if they need it. Hopefully they don't. But to have him and Alt next to each other on the right side just makes you feel so much better about at least 3/5 of the offensive line. Now we just got to fix those other two spots.
They sure do. Yes. Becton was my OT one coming out of that draft class. Did not work out that way, but a big fan of his game and how he played last year. Cause he looked like he turned it around last year. All right. So a great deal getting Becton, being able to get out of it if it doesn't work out, coming off a career year and getting him at a pretty good price. Is very, very smart business from Ortiz and the Chargers. So next up here, Jamie, the Chargers re-signed Mike Williams, former Steeler, former Jet last year. 1 year, $6 million.
I know a lot of people are at least happy, if not excited about this. I'm not one of them. I hate going back to what feels like nostalgic moves, just because you're familiar with them. Mm-hmm. I get it. Like, it's an incentive-laden deal. He's probably going to earn $4 or $5 million against the cap this year, plus incentives. So it's not the expenditure. They only got him for 1 year. That's not a big deal. I just don't know how much he has left in the tank. He's always hurt. And I think what concerns me is because of the familiarity, and you hear him talk about Herbert trusting him and knowing where to put the ball for him, he's going to be their starting X this year. There's no other X on the roster right now. Maybe they draft one in the middle rounds to develop, but because of the rapport he has with Herbert, he's going to be the primary X because nobody else can play that position right now. And he looked awful last year. And yeah, he was on a couple of teams that couldn't get him the ball, but he just looked like he had nothing left. No juice. He was already slow, already struggled to separate. I just think you're going to get so many more contested catches now where the ball is being put at risk because Herbert trusts him, where that's something we had gotten away from. He's going to start forcing the ball to him. I don't like it. And you can disagree with me if you want. I know there are people in this chat, I'm sure, who love the move. Even though it's only 1 year and it's not a lot of money, it's just a crutch that I prefer they had not gone back to. It just feels like, I don't know. It just doesn't feel good. I don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah, it left a bad taste in my mouth too. I'm not very hot on this move like most fans are. I mean, he hasn't had over 300 yards receiving in 2 seasons. He couldn't break the Jets starting wide receiver group at a camp. And then he got traded to the Steelers where they had to have wide receiver help going into the playoffs, and he didn't do anything there either. And I don't know, man. The injury history concerns me at this point. It just feels like he is on a downslide in his career. And yes, it's 1 year. That's fine. But if the plan is to have Mike Williams come in here to push QJ, and hopefully they're competing for wide receiver 3 or 4 at that point, I am all over it. But the Chargers have got to get another starting wide receiver. Well, actually 2. It feels like they got to add 2 more wide receivers outside of Lad McConkey because QJ isn't getting it done. Mike Williams won't get it done. They need somebody else there. It looks like it might be through the draft at this point because all the wide receivers are almost all off the board now. And this was a position they had to upgrade this season when they did not have enough firepower in the playoffs, and it really hamstrung them against the Texans. But I guess they're deciding to go to that well during the draft, I guess, hopefully. But, they needed to upgrade it this offseason. I'm not sure that Mike Williams really does move the needle and upgrades them as much as some think. It feels like if this was 2020, it would be an upgrade, but we're in the Lord's year of 2025, and this is not Mike Williams' year. So in this stage of his career, I don't feel like that gets it done. It's fine as a depth signing as long as they get much, much better in the draft with these wide receivers.
Yeah, I just don't think it's going to be a depth signing, even if they draft guys. They're going to have to earn that time, and they're going to have to overcome Herbert and his connection with Williams. So he's going to be the starting X. Even if they draft people, they're going to have to work their way up and earn that, which is fine. That's the way it should be. But I just don't think that he has much left.
So let me ask you a question. Would you rather have had Mike Williams at his deal at 1 year, $6 million, or Joshua Palmer at the deal he got with Buffalo, which just escaped me? I had it in my head for a second, but
it was 3 years, $36 million.
Yeah. Would you rather?
I see neither?
You got to pick one.
I mean, they're kind of the same player.
Yeah, but 3 years, $36 million is.
I would not have paid him $12 million a year. Mm-hmm. So if I had to pick one, I guess I would pick Williams.
And there you
begrudgingly, and I grit my teeth and swear and grunt and be pissed off, but I would take him, I guess, if I had to.
Well, there you go. And as I just swung Jamie to approve this signing. Just
I don't
now.
want to. I don't want to. No.
Well, yeah. At least we didn't
throw a tantrum.
As long as the Chargers didn't sign Joshua Palmer to 12 per, because that is insane. All right. So next up, off of Mike Williams, on to Dante Jackson, another Steeler. They signed the cornerback to 2 years, $13 million. The Chargers obviously lost Christian Fulton to the Chiefs. They got Dante Jackson to add to the young group of Cam Hart and Tarheeb Still. But Dante Jackson, throughout his entire career, has been a gambler. He always gambles in coverage, and it's great because he'll get you 5 interceptions like he did last season, but also he'll give up a bunch of receptions. So there is some push and pull with signing like Jackson. What he will do is help you in the run game. He was very aggressive at tackling line of scrimmage last year. Really like what he did in Pittsburgh. He feels like he's good for a handful of tackles for a loss per season. Jackson will hopefully start for one of the starting CB spots, but I hope that it is with another corner coming in, hopefully maybe in the draft. But I'd love to see some competition, not just hand Jackson that starting role right away, but more than capable, has starting experience. And I am okay with this signing, but I know that there's going to be some frustration that definitely comes with this move at times.
Yeah. So they didn't spend a ton of money on him. He's probably only going to make $4 or $5 million this year against the cap. So it's not a super costly move. They didn't go crazy on him. It feels like they paid for the interceptions, kind of like when the Chargers drafted JT Woods and they drafted the interceptions without really evaluating the situations. He's hyper athletic. He makes a lot of plays on the football, whether it's interceptions or PBUs, which I'm sure they're excited about. He's been considered at times to be a really good cover corner, which might be something else they're excited about. I'm hoping, like you said, when you told me they were going to bring in they're looking to bring in a veteran corner, Dante Jackson was not the name that I envisioned. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I was thinking like Carlton Davis or any number of guys who are better football players than Dante Jackson. But if you're going to gamble on a guy who makes plays, I guess, give him a chance to earn a spot. Hopefully he's competing with Dean Leonard and somebody they draft in the first few rounds, hopefully, at corner. He's not a long-term answer.
Mm-hmm.
But if he makes you a few plays, then so be it. And they'll probably we haven't seen the deal yet. I haven't seen any official numbers on the deal. My guess is it's backloaded and there's a ripcord with probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 to $9 million that they can save, or probably more like $5 or $6 million with the signing bonus. But you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
it's probably backloaded with a ripcord and an opportunity to save several $1 million by cutting him. So it's not going to hurt him too much. Just not the name I envisioned with all that money to spend.
Right. Right. I don't think any of these names are, to be honest with you, Jamie. Maybe Becton. All right. So moving on down this list, they signed a pair of interior defensive linemen outside of free agents. We talked about Tart a little bit earlier, but there's some outside free agents as well. The first one here is Deshaun Hand. It was 1 year, $2.3 million, the former Dolphin and Lion and something else.
Yeah, he's a pretty stout run defender. He's not a guy who's going to get to the quarterback a whole lot, if at all. Not the guy that I was hoping for on the interior to disrupt and get to the quarterback, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But I think this kind of tells you how they feel about their interior defensive line. They've got Aboigbe coming back. They've got Tito coming back. And they went out and they signed 2 nose tackles. So to me, that kind of tells you like they're not really sure about Aboigbe and Tito, and they're looking to stop the run, which is good. But they also need to get to the quarterback from the interior. Like, that's the biggest thing they missed, and they've missed it for a while. They just need somebody who can win up front and get to the quarterback from the inside, and they don't have that. So hopefully Hand plays well. $2.3 million is nothing. It's 1 year. It's basically a prove-it deal to see if he can earn a bigger deal somewhere else. I'm sure he'll play a lot because they're so hard up for run stoppers on the interior. It's fine.
Yeah, it is fine because he's just a nice run-stuffing rotational piece. That's really what it is. It does not solve that issue that is getting bigger by the day that they don't sign anybody, of not having any real interior pass rushers to get after the quarterback. But this does add a helping hand. Helping hand. There we go. Helping hand. Deshaun Hand. Thank you. In the run game. That was completely accidental. I would have never made that terrible pun. It does help in the run game. He did have the most tackles of his career last season. The Chargers needed some depth, obviously, so Hand should get into the rotation, especially on rundowns. They needed to add some beef in the middle. They got a veteran here in Hand, and I'm okay with it as a rotational piece. One that I don't love all that much is the next name here. Benjamin St-Juste from the Commanders. He signs a 1 year, $2.5 million deal. Was kind of a spot starter for the Commanders. Watched as much as I could of him leading up to this podcast. And he kind of got propelled into the starting lineup last year, and he struggled. He struggled so much that towards the end of the year, they benched him. And he was a big reason why the Commanders went out and traded for Marshawn Lattimore towards the end of the season to make that push in the playoffs, because St-Juste could not be depended on. But really good size. He's 6'3", 200. The ball skills are terrible, very lackluster. And either way, this kind of adds some cornerback depth with guys from last year, which is like Eli Apple and Kendall Williamson. So I guess in that respect, they're signing guys off the street. So this kind of helps with your depth because you've got a guy who has starting experience. But St. Juice is another kid who played at Michigan. So there are some ties there to Harbaugh and Minter before he transferred to Minnesota. So there is that connection with the staff already. But to me, this is a bottom of the depth chart corner who is probably going to be on the bubble and battling for a corner spot, hopefully, at the bottom of that depth chart.
Yeah, agree. Don't love it. Bring out an old friend. No me gusta. Don't like it at all. I don't know. It just kind of feels like they threw a dart at the dartboard and picked the corner that it landed on. He's kind of a penalty magnet. Not very reliable, like you said. He's big. He has some physical traits. Maybe they feel like they can develop those physical traits into like a press man cover corner and provide some depth there. We shall see. This cornerback room, they've added 2 bodies to it, and it really hasn't gotten a whole lot better. Questions about Cam Hart. He had a lot of injuries last year. I think 2 concussions, if I'm not mistaken. So hopefully he can stay healthy. We still don't know what to expect out of Dean Leonard. Now we've got 2 more corners competing for that starting corner spot who we don't know what to expect from. Just a lot of questions and uncertainty in the cornerback room. So hopefully there's some help coming from the draft and maybe UDFA to help even that out a little bit. But hopefully they bring in some competition and either he plays really well or he gets cut because don't love it.
Yeah, not either. And hopefully it's a guy that's kind of helping push the bottom of that corner depth chart. All right, next up here is a linebacker you kind of referred to a little bit earlier here, Jamie. It is the Texans' former linebacker, Del'Shawn Phillips.
Yeah, so this is their Nick Neiman replacement. He's basically a special teams only off-ball linebacker. He's a guy who I think has played something crazy like 12 or 1,400 snaps on special teams over the last 3 or 4 years. So very productive. If you look at the PFF ratings on special teams, for Phillips and for Neiman, they're almost identical. So it's just a 1-for-1 trade here.
Mm-hmm.
Good move, rounds out the room, gives you another solid special teams player. Don't know the numbers on it yet, but based on what they paid Dye, I'm going to assume it's probably somewhere between $1.5 million and $2 million for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a 1 year deal, right? Have you seen numbers on
yes, yeah, both of these last 2 are, but we don't know the numbers yet.
Yeah, so probably somewhere in the $2 million range, give or take. And he's going to make the team and contribute on special teams, so it's fine.
Yeah. This is definitely your 1-for-1 trade. This is a special teams lifer who's going to pitch in at the bottom of your LB depth chart. Special teams only, played in a pinch with the Texans, but most likely will not see the field. So just another special teams guy to add with Dye and add a little bit of depth at linebacker. So I am totally fine with this move. And then last here is Naquan Jones, formerly of the Cardinals. He's another one of those players who was on that Titans roster with under Vrabel's defense that the Chargers love to pick from. We've seen a lot of those players roll through here. He had a career high in sacks this past season with the Cards. He had tied his career high with 4 tackles for a loss. Another run-stuffing tackle to add the rotation, and another guy who will not get you sacks, but will shore up your defensive line in the run game. And just a kind of depth, rotational interior guy.
Kind of a warm body who can hopefully stop the run a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say he had 3 sacks last year. Is that right?
I think that's right, yeah.
But I think he only hit the quarterback 4 times. So that tells you he's not really getting the quarterback a lot.
No.
I would not count on those sacks repeating.
No.
Not an interior disruptor against the pass at all. So I wouldn't look for that.
Yeah.
But whereas last year, in some ways, they felt a little small on the interior defensive line, both Hand and Jones are 300-plus pounds. They're big boys who are going to take up space and clog lanes, which I think is what they're looking for. And they're probably going to look for that interior rusher early in the draft. Yep. So it's fine. You're probably looking at, again, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 million to $2 million, not a whole lot of money. Probably not much, if anything, in the way of a signing bonus. Maybe some incentives mixed in, but very minimal. He'll be here to compete for a spot. We'll see what happens with the rest of the defensive line room. Can Tito beat him out? Can Aboigbe beat him out? We'll see. But right now, he looks like at least a solid run stuffer who might occasionally get you a sack or two. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right. So if you guys got your questions, we'll move on to our favorite free agents coming up that are still on the list. But we got some questions here. Blazing Bolts, glad you guys are back. Thoughts on keeping Mack and Perryman? We talked about it. Feel like they are a good 1-2 duo in Perryman and Henley. Jamie, do you think the Chargers should bring back Keenan?
No.
Talking about coming back to that nostalgia. Well,
no.
Yeah.
No.
Me neither.
They cut Mike and Keenan for a reason. I get they needed an X to bring back. I think part of the reason that they didn't keep Keenan outside of the money last year was he's primarily a slot receiver, and you've got both QJ and Ladd, who basically need to be in the slot more often than not to be successful. So I would not bring back Keenan. I know people want to reunite the boys and get that group back, and I just feel like it's taking a big step backwards. When they were trying to get younger and faster, now you're getting older and slower. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I would not. What do you think?
No, I talked about it on the podcast I recorded earlier in the week. Keenan Allen is not on my list. I would not bring him back. He is in the rear view, and I'm not looking back. I do not want Keenan Allen on this roster. One of the best Chargers wide receiver in their wide receiver room history, but I am not at this point of his career bringing him back. I feel like he hurts this team more than helps it, because then you're taking more stops away from everybody else. And I don't know how effective he is at this stage of his career, much like I felt like with Mike Williams, but alas, they brought him back anyway. But I am not, I mean, you already did Mike Williams to us. You cannot bring Keenan Allen back, and I cannot deal with the insufferable picks of Herbert and Mike and Keenan back together again and reuniting the boys captions and all that shit. I can't do that again. So, no, I don't. Please spare me with that. I cannot do it. So, Jamie, let's talk about our favorite guys that we like that are still on the board here in terms of free agents. Who's kind of you're hoping is your kind of like first guy that you just love? Not that it's the number one ranked free agent, but who are you looking at?
So I have 6 guys on my list.
Oh, okay.
3 or 4 of whom, actually I would say 5 of whom I would be pretty happy if they signed, and one of whom is there just because I'm worried about the group that he plays in. So
Okay.
the first one, and this is somebody who was on my list from the very beginning. I think he's a perfect fit. I think he makes sense from a leadership standpoint. He would really tie that interior defensive line group together and give you some flexibility inside and maybe at a 5 technique. I would sign Calais Campbell in a heartbeat. He's 39 years old, but he's still highly productive. I believe he had 5.5 sacks last year.
5 last year, yeah.
5. He never seems to miss games, or at least not many. He's always on the field. He is super productive. He's still good against the run. And if he's out there, he's going to get to the quarterback. He just changes the defensive line room, and it gives them some options, so they don't necessarily have to take a defensive tackle in the first round. And it would give whoever they take some time to develop. And he's only going to take 1 year. I think last year he played for about $3 million. I would try to sign him to a similar deal. Throw some incentives at him. So I'd say like 1 year, $3 million, maybe throw $2 million in incentives at him that he could reach. And I just think it makes too much sense from a leadership standpoint, from a productivity standpoint. He fits the culture. He's familiar with the way the Chargers want to do things from his time with the Ravens. It's one of those fits that, even though it doesn't seem super flashy, it just makes sense on literally every level. If you're the GM and you're evaluating a player / asset and you're trying to figure out, how does he fit under the cap? How does he fit in the locker room? How does he fit on the field? he answers all those questions. He fits the scheme. Everything makes sense. There's nothing that doesn't make sense with him, and he's going to come cheap, and he's going to make you better. So that's the first one on my list. What about you?
He's our consensus number one for sure. Yeah, and he's got the tie to Ortiz in Baltimore. I mean, Calais Campbell changes everything in this interior defensive line group. When they signed Poona Ford last offseason, the three of us were very, very happy and talking about how they finally have somebody on the interior. They can get after the quarterback. Just an underrated signing that's really going to prove to, pay off towards the end of the season. And he absolutely did, and it helped get him a contract with the Rams. Calais Campbell is another one of those guys, not that it's going to propel him into another contract because he's, 39 at this point. But he changes everything in that defensive line and probably propels them more than Poona Ford did last season. Even at this stage of his career, the last 3 seasons, he's had more than 5 sacks. He's been with, it feels like, 3 or 4 different teams with Arizona and Jacksonville and Baltimore. And I think he was just with the Dolphins. I mean, he's played everywhere and been successful every single place he goes. You have the familiarity with him, and he's going to be a steady presence. So absolutely give Calais Campbell a 1-year deal. You've got the money anyway, but he's going to come cheap, so it doesn't matter. You fill that interior defensive line, and then you can kind of start to think about interior defensive line in the, maybe late day 2, early day 3 type scenario now, whereas you don't have a Calais Campbell, and you're thinking, man, they might have to pick something up early day 2, maybe, early day 3 at this point. Because they just don't have the pass rushers in the interior of this defensive line. So it feels like Campbell checks all the boxes and makes your defensive line better right away, and you're already a week past into free agency. Get this deal, get the deal done, and bring in a veteran presence on the interior of the defensive line. Campbell's my number 1 for sure. The next guy is a guy I already mentioned. I think I said it on Twitter. I said it on the other podcast. I want Will Hernandez. I just feel like, I know Tevin Jenkins is probably a lot of people's a go-to at this point too, but I'd also maybe throw in Brandon Scherf, and I know I'm kind of clumping all the guards together, but I just think Will Hernandez brings that kind of road grader mentality that they really, really want in the run game, and it's a guy that fits the scheme perfectly. And once you bring in Will Hernandez, then that kicks Zion into center, hopefully, where he could compete with Bozeman, and then you kind of take care of that situation, and then you don't have to think about filling 2 slots in the draft again, because you definitely need a guard and you definitely need a center. So getting a guard early now with the addition of Becton, it just feels like Will Hernandez is just kind of that bully that would absolutely thrive in this kind of offensive system. I still think he's got some left. He's got his issues in pass protection, and I understand that. A lot of these guys have their own issues, and that's why they're still available after a year or after a week into free agency. So I understand that he's not perfect, but Will Hernandez to me just fits the scheme too perfectly, and I want him on the left side.
He was on my initial list when I did my free agent list last week. He's still on my list. The only concerns I have with him are I think he's coming off either a knee injury or Achilles injury. And he's primarily played right guard for like the last 4 or 5 years. So switching him to the other side, I'm not sure how that works out at this stage of his career, but he's another guy I think you can get on a 1-year deal, maybe pay him like $5 million in terms of a cap number, and then give him maybe a couple $1 million in incentives. And he's going to make you better. And that allows them to not have to worry about Zion competing at 2 positions if they really believe he can play center, which God, I hope they don't. Then he can focus on that, and he doesn't have to focus on, trying to win 2 positions. But if he can play left guard and he's healthy, it's a no-brainer because Zion has not lived up to expectations, and I'm not super high on the idea of moving him to center.
All right. So, what about you? Where's your next guy?
So Hernandez was my next guy, but we just covered him. So I'll jump to my number 3. I've got Preston Smith on my list as that kind of rotational edge. I was gonna have Aziz Ojiri on this list, but I decided to go with Preston instead because he feels like he's more likely to take a 1-year deal. Again, somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 million. He's a guy who, if he's on the field and he's playing, he's probably going to get you somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 or 6 sacks. I think he's got a little bit left. He just complements that room, and again, gives them options, because right now they're in a position where they have, I would say, like 5 or 6 positions that they have to fill, and they're going to have to choose between those five or six positions in the first round. I would like for them to give themselves more flexibility in the first couple of rounds, so they don't feel like they have to take an edge rusher or they have to take a defensive tackle. And I feel like Campbell and Smith are guys who they can fit easily. They would get production out of, and they just kind of round out those groups and make those groups better and deeper.
Yeah. Yeah. Preston Smith was on my list. I would also add Zadarius Smith to that list as well. Another aging edge rusher. He was on my list. He was with the Browns, got 5 sacks, got traded to the Lions during the trade deadline, got 4 sacks with Detroit, had 9 sacks last season. It just feels like everywhere he goes, he's good for 5 to 10 sacks every single year. And another veteran that I feel still has enough gas that if you put with Mac and you have Zadarius, that you can rest those 2 aging veterans with Atuli, and you can spell them with Dupree. I just feel like adding another veteran edge really, really helps you, and it really helps his defense. I like Preston Smith a lot. He's on my list. I'd add Zadarius Smith with that edge group as well. And then just because we've already talked about it, I feel like J.K. Dobbins deserves a little shout out here, because it just feels like the perfect complement, like we talked about earlier with Najee. Adding Najee, Dobbins, you already got Vidal. If you want to bring in another running back to round out that group for the future, so be it. But at least it kind of like helps you get a little bit of cushion in the draft by adding a guy like Dobbins.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I would offer him, I'm sure he's probably looking for a multi-year deal, but I would offer him a deal very similar to what they offered to Najee, and just have them complement each other. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay. What about you next?
So my next one, because I am very, very, very uncomfortable with the cornerback room, is Stephon Gilmore, who continues to play well. He's old. I think he's like 35 or 36, maybe even a little bit older than that. But he just continues to go out and produce. He's not going to get you a ton of interceptions, but he's good in coverage. He's a veteran. He's smart. I think he could provide a lot of leadership to that cornerback room. And again, provide some flexibility, maybe let them wait a little bit longer to take a corner instead of potentially feeling like they have to get one in the first round. We're in this situation at edge, at defensive tackle, at corner, at wide receiver, at tight end, where like it feels like all these positions have to get resolved in the first 2 or 3 rounds because of the way Tom Telesco managed this roster for the last 11 years. And just having some flexibility and some breathing room and being able to push a couple of these positions back a round or 2 and take some pressure off just makes a lot of sense to me. So Gilmore is a guy that I would bring in. I don't think it would take much more than a 1-year deal, maybe $7.5 million, give him a couple $1 million in incentives, and just let him go out and play for a year while you're developing a guy or 2 behind him.
Okay. I didn't have Gilmore on my list. I completely understand it. I had Rasul Douglas on my list, a little bit younger, struggled last year with Buffalo, but the year before that was coming off one of his best seasons of his career, kind of have a down year. Feel like maybe you could take a gamble on him, bringing him in to fight with Mike a little bit, not Mike Jackson, Dante Jackson. I was thinking of Mike Hilton. Dante Jackson, battle it out for that starting cornerback job. At the very least, you've got some pretty nice cornerback depth and some starting experience. I like taking a flyer on Rasul Douglas. But one position group we were talking about that I feel like it needs a little bit more love is the safety group. And Justin Simmons and Juan Thornhill are both out there. And it feels like adding a veteran presence on the back end. Then you start to push Gilman down the depth chart. And you let Molden roam a little bit more, take a little bit of pressure off of Derwin a little bit more too, not having to play any free safety. You've got enough depth there. I could see that making some sense. And then you've got, some hard hitters in the back end there too. So I wouldn't mind taking a little flyer on a Simmons or a Thornhill as well.
I'd be okay with that. I think you could also solve that with a Tony Jefferson. So,
sure.
However you want to do it, I'd be good with any one of those 3. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. You got any more left? Did we go through your list?
I have one more, and
Okay.
this is probably going to surprise some people. It surprised me, but it's again just because of the shape of the cornerback room. I was just looking at the corners, and I thought, you know what? If you can get Asante Samuel Jr. back on a low number deal with some incentives, just on a 1-year deal to come in and compete and see if he can get back to his form before whatever it was that happened last year happened. He's a guy who, we know he's been able to play at some point. So he's just a guy that I thought, buy low, like low risk, high reward kind of thing. And if it doesn't work out, you're not really spending a whole lot of money. So he'd be at the very bottom of my list if nothing else worked out. But just a thought.
The chat saying JK is gone. Is that like literally he signed with somebody while we were doing the podcast, or is that just he's not re-signing? Let me know, chat. That is very surprising to me. He is not on my list, but I would understand a 1-year deal if you're trying to figure that all out. It feels like that relationship is beyond repair, but if not, then maybe that would work out. I'm okay with it. You could have worse depth options than Samuel at this point. The one, okay, all right. JK has not signed anywhere. All right, cool. All right, the my last one on my list is kind of like it'd be okay if we had him. Not like a man. I'd love to have. It is David Andrews, the Patriot center that ended up getting cut. It just feels like he's older, but if you want a veteran center and not have to mess with that with Zion, and you feel like Zion's okay at guard, and you really want somebody who is a tried and true captain of an offensive line, David Andrews could be that. Now, is he all that good anymore? I mean, he's okay. Watching him back, he wasn't great last year, but he was okay. I'd say he's better than Bozeman. But if you want a veteran leader in the middle of your line, next to Becton, who it feels like if you put Bradley Bozeman there, it would be an issue. But you want a captain, you want somebody who obviously has a veteran presence and, maybe could tap into that gas tank for the last year or two of his career. I wouldn't mind signing a guy like David Andrews, who, is at the end of his career. So you're thinking of like a very short-term deal if you were to sign him.
Yeah, a couple of the names you could look at. I didn't give them a whole lot of thought, but Shaq Mason could be a guy you could look at for left guard or center.
Yes. He was pretty good with Houston last year when we were watching, prepping for him for the playoffs.
Yep, he'd be a good fit. And like I said, I think he could. He's played both guard positions and center, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody like an Andre James could be a good fit at center, just to bring in somebody to compete. So those are some options you could think about as well.
Do you like Garrett Bradbury and his recent cut? I mean, he hasn't been good for a while.
Not really.
Yeah, it doesn't really excite me either. All right, I think we've pretty much done it all. Oh, what about Stephon Diggs or Amari Cooper? I know chat somebody mentioned that earlier. Any interest in either of those?
Yeah, I just feel like it's repeating what you did with Mike Williams. I feel like they got 5 guys in the room right now. I think they need to draft 2 wide receivers. I would not. I think at this point I would not sign another receiver.
Yeah, I think they're past that point now.
One option that could become a reality tomorrow, we'll see what happens, is Mark Andrews, the tight end for the Ravens.
Okay, I was just going to bring that up.
They could potentially cut him, so that could be an option, and that's somebody I think they would probably be all over if he does hit the market. I've said in the Discord, I got ridiculed for it, but I don't care. I would trade for him just to make sure you get him, because if he hits the market, there is no guarantee you're going to get him. So if that's something you value, and again, he kind of, it's like Calais, right? Like he fits the salary cap, he fits in the locker room, he fits schematically. They're going to find ways to get the ball to him because Roman's done it before. Like everything makes sense.
Yeah. So I would
absolutely. The chat saying they picked up his option. So
they did.
They're not going to cut him.
Oh, all right. So they'd have to trade for him. All right. So, that answers this question. Person McPerson. Welcome back, y'all. Stay well. What do you think the likelihood of a Mark Andrews trade? It's got to be a trade now. It's not going to be a cut, it sounds like.
It has to be a trade.
It has to be a trade. Another name also, Dallas Goedert, the chat is thrown around. If you had to pick either Mark Andrews or Dallas Goedert, where is your, say it's the same, let's say it's a 4th round pick for both. Which one would you go for? Just to make
I would go for Andrews personally, because he's played in the system. I think he's a better tight end. He's so good in the red zone. It's just, he fits. Like, there's no questions. It's like Calais. He slots right in. It just makes too much sense on every level. There isn't a single reason not to bring him in. And maybe you extend him for a couple of years and you kick that need for a tight end down the road a little bit.
Yeah, Mark Andrews is not too far away from being one of the best tight ends in the NFL. I know he had a down year, especially all those who drafted him in fantasy. It felt like he was a fantasy. He was on the fantasy chopping block through Twitter all season because everybody drafted him high and he didn't produce. But it just feels like schematically it fits. He's got obvious ties to the front office. He's a hell of a run blocker, which this team values, and he is a much better pass catcher than Dallas Goedert. I just feel like he checks all the box. While Dallas Goedert would be great if they were able to get him, and say Andrews was asking price was too rich, like they wanted a second for him or something. I'm okay with Dallas Goedert, but he is a number 2 behind Mark Andrews if everything is even. If it's the same thing, you can get both tight ends for a 4th round pick. I'm throwing out a 4th for Mark Andrews every day. I'm absolutely doing that. And you had mentioned it to me, Jamie, and I don't think this was on Twitter or anything, but there is just too much value in the 4th round pick could be type of scenarios wherein you have the sure thing and a Mark Andrews for the pick.
Yeah. I think because Telesco hoarded picks for so long, and because admittedly Ortiz had such a good draft last year, mm-hmm. and he made so much out of late round picks, that people tend to think that every draft pick is gold. But for me, I guess I just look at it a little differently. And I tried to explain this in the Discord, and I don't think I explained it very well, but I'm going to give it a shot here. For me, I kind of look at acquiring players in the NFL like I look at acquiring real estate for a portfolio. And for me, I look at it from the standpoint of how does he fit, right? You're not just acquiring, yes, you're acquiring a person, obviously, and a player, but you're acquiring an asset. You're acquiring a commodity. And you have to evaluate, can we get a player at his level who's going to produce like he would produce this year and maybe for the next 2 or 3 years with a 3rd or 4th round pick? Does he fit under the cap? Does he fit in the locker room? Does he fit schematically in the lineup? And do we think he's going to produce for at least the next 2 or 3 years? Because if you trade a 4th round pick for him, you're trading 4 years of control. So if you can get 2 or 3 years of control in addition to the existing year on him, then that's an even swap right there. And then you start looking at salary cap. Okay, check that box. That fits. Productivity. Okay, check that box. That fits. Does he run block? Check that box. That fits. Does he catch passes? Check that box. That fits. Is he good in the red zone? Check that box. He had 11 touchdowns last year. And you can look at him and say his numbers are declining, but that's also situational because he was competing for snaps with Isaiah Likely. Mm-hmm. So if you take him out of that situation and you put him in a situation with the Chargers where he would more than likely be, I think, if he's here, he's the clear-cut number 2 option in the passing game based on the way we know Greg Roman wants to run the offense and wants to use tight ends. You're looking at a guy who's probably going to give you 700 or 800 yards and 6 to 8 touchdowns, if not more, over the next 3 or 4 years. And it could be a lot more based on the way Roman uses that offense. He is not done. He's not cooked. He's not a guy who's nearing the end. He's got maybe as many as 3 or 4 really productive years left before he starts to really decline. And he fits this offense perfectly. So for me, I give up a 4th for him based on the situation now where we know he's not getting cut. I would give up a 3rd round pick for him because all the boxes are checked. and you get to control him, and you get to negotiate a deal with him where nobody else does. So to me, that makes sense.
Yeah, every time I hear this argument of like, well, I mean, a 4th round pick is too rich for a Mark Andrews, or a 3rd round pick's too rich. It always feels like that Family Guy meme. I don't know if you've seen this, James, where it's like you could have the boat or you could have the mystery box, and the mystery box could be a boat. Like you're going for the thing that could, I mean, at a 4th round pick, you're probably wanting somebody who's going to give you 11 touchdowns. You know what I'm saying? Like you're looking for a tight end who might give you 8 and say, 600 yards. Well, Mark Andrews just gave 673 yards and 11 touchdowns. Like, you're not going to get that in the 4th round, or at least it's very unlikely that you're going to get. It's very Isaiah unlikely that you're going to get that type of production in a 4th round pick. So yes, Loveland would be great, and everybody's wanting to get that lightning in a bottle with Brock Bowers like last year. But you have a productive guy that fits your scheme, and you're giving up a 4th round pick. Fine. I am all for it. I am all for it, because what you're hoping for in that 4th round pick will most likely not produce what you're going to get in Mark Andrews. And yes, you might not have that many of years of control with that draft pick, but it feels like a 4th round tight end is the cap of what Mark Andrews would get you. And he's going to give you that consistently. So I am trading for Mark Andrews tomorrow if I can do it.
Agreed. It
Yeah.
just makes sense on every level. And not every 4th round pick is going to turn into a star player, let alone a productive player outside of special teams. I mean, what people are saying, a 3rd round pick is too much right now. Last year, the Chargers took Junior Colston in the 3rd round. You're telling me you wouldn't trade a chance to draft Junior Colston for maybe 3 years of Mark Andrews?
Yeah.
I find that hard to believe.
And a Boygby was their 4th round pick. So Would you not? I would trade. I would do a 1-for-1 swap right now for those two. Yeah. So I am okay with it. And I think like Tom's saying, let's take the boat. The mystery box could be anything. It could even be a boat. Just take the boat. Who cares about the mystery box in that pick? All right. So that's it for us, guys. I appreciate you guys joining in. Almost 90 minutes going over these free agents and everything else still left on the board. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Super appreciative to everybody who's been really supportive to myself and Jamie and Craig and everything else, because we've haven't been able to record podcasts because of reasons out of most of our control, but we will record as much as we possibly can. Thank you for everybody for being supportive, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. We'll do a
salute. Yeah.